You're listening to the J Report Talk Radio on PTN Network.
Africa was, is, and will be better off without Jesus, Allah, and Muhammad. All of the information that we have heard from others in our camp and outside of our camp that have tried to make Christianity and Islam black or African is wrong. All of it. All of it. We Africans had gods, had spirit forces, had spiritual systems long before the divergent thought and the imposing thought of Christianity and Islam. Up until around 300 A.D., if we go by the Gregorian calendar, all of Kemet, or what we now call Egypt, called upon and venerated Amen-Ra, Ptah, etc., as their unique and special understanding of and relationship with the creative forces of the universe. For the most part, they honored and venerated their women, and this was shown in their cosmogony formation as well as within the regular society. It was these years that can mainly be seen as Kemet having cultural cohesion, i.e., the way of life these Africans created without outside interference maintained and governed their existence. The death blow that finally conquered Kemet after centuries of attempts by outsiders finally set in around 300 A.D. Gregorian calendar, and then Egypt proper was born. And eventually this outside interference created what we call Coptic or Egyptian Christianity today. Amen-Ra, Ptah, gives way for a nondescript and foreign God term and a non-historical Jesus character. How do you get a group of people to stop calling on the creative forces in ways they themselves created and get them to call upon those forces with new names and new meanings? Cultural disruption. The same is true for Abyssinia, which became Ethiopia in 400 A.D. Gregorian calendar. The same is true for Kush, or ancient Nubia, which became Sudan around 550 A.D. Gregorian calendar. So hopefully, I'm trying to draw a picture here, and I hope you see it. Kemet falls and becomes Egypt around 300 A.D. 100 years pass, Abyssinia falls and becomes Ethiopia spiritually, meaning Christianity incurs into these lands in 400 A.D. And then the march continues southward. The death march continues southward. And around 550, it reaches ancient Nubia and Sudan. And that little bit was new for me. I just learned that from a piece by Makesi-tehuti, brother out of South Africa. He was doing a piece on the Sudan, and he mentioned this one little tidbit. Another irony here is that before the penetration of Arabs in Nubia, this area of Sudan had been Christianized from early beginnings. By 543 to 580 A.D., Christianity had established preeminence over purely African religious practices, and indeed, Christianity then became the official religion. So 300, Kemet is no more, Their religious systems are no more. Christianity hits. In Abyssinia, the traditional ways that they practice are basically no more. And you see this Ethiopian Christianity. King Azania, Aksum, he proclaimed Ethiopia back then a Christian nation, one of the first colonizations that took place, the second one, if you will, 400 AD. And then ancient Nubia, Kush, present-day Sudan, Christianity continues down and penetrates them and becomes their official religion around 543 AD. When outside forces impose their culture upon another group by killing, by ostracizing, by omission, by information distortion, etc., after time, that said group's original cultural creations begin to give way for the outside cultural impositions. You get a few generations of this, and the original cultural group will wrongly begin to personally, individually, and collectively identify with the outside foreign culture. This is why Egypt, once Kemet, after 300 AD, began to identify and deal only with Christianity. This is why Ethiopia, once Abyssinia, after 400 AD, began to only identify and deal with Christianity. And this is why ancient Nubia, ancient Kush, now Sudan, began to only identify with Christianity at that time. But then we know we have the Islamic incursions. The same is true for the Islamic invasions and the Arab cultural disruption of the place we now call Africa today. Before there was a Jesus, Allah, and Muhammad, we Africans knew the existence and supreme presence of Khepera, Ma'at, Tehuti, etc. Something traumatic happened to our African consciousness to get us now to only identify with and deal with any of these foreign systems that we now cling to today. That is an example of our present cultural disruption. If you cannot positively answer what we were doing spiritually before a Jesus, before an Allah, before a Muhammad, you are not dealing with Africa on our own terms. Period. If you cannot positively answer what we were doing spiritually before the thought, before the idea of a Jesus, before the idea of an Allah, before the thought and the idea of a Muhammad, you are not dealing with Africa on our own terms. This holds true for contemporary Africa as it does for ancient Africa. Before outside invasions in parts of southern Africa, people were calling on and venerating Nkulunkulu. Now you mostly hear Jesus. In parts of East Africa, people were calling on and venerating Ngai. Now you mostly hear Allah or Jesus. Before outside invasions in part of West Africa, people were calling on and venerating Nyame. Now you mostly hear Jesus. Before outside invasions, the place we now call Africa experienced high levels of cultural cohesion. And their relative peace and their longevity are its results. After invasions, which is the very nature of invasions themselves, the place we now call Africa is and continues to experience high levels of cultural disruption and cultural confusion, and the constant turmoil all throughout the land are its results. No degree of bad scholarship loudly passed off as truth no degree of bait and switch and cultural misdirection, no degree of focusing only on skin color and not dealing with cultural values, precepts, traditions, rituals, etc., can make false the real truth that the place we now call Africa was 1,000 times better on all levels you can think of before Jesus, before Allah, before Muhammad, than they are right now with them, period, point blank. Africa was better off without Jesus, Allah, and Muhammad, and will be better off without Jesus, Allah, and Muhammad in the future. We must acknowledge and step out of our present cultural disruption and get back to a culturally cohesive state of being. Now, to really, really see and understand all of what I just said, you have to ask but one question, and I'll even repeat it. What did Africa create before outside invasions, and what has Africa created since they now latch only onto Jesus, Allah, and Muhammad? What did Africa create before outside invasions, and what has Africa created since they now latch only onto Jesus, Allah, and Muhammad?
You're listening to the J Report Talk Radio on PTN Network.